He left her bleeding on the cold pavement, not a scratch, not a word, just a flick of his hand, a life discarded like trash. She had trusted him, loved him, betrayed by the one she thought invincible. Now, years later, he kneels, broken, at the door of the woman he shattered. He doesn't know the woman who saved him, whose hand steadied his trembling heart, is the same she left to die. The city never forgets. Pain lingers in the corners of rooms. Shadows speak in whispers. And yet, she smiles behind the iron gate, calm as dawn, a storm barely restrained beneath her porcelain skin. She remembers every lie, every touch, every cold betrayal, and she knows exactly how to make him see the weight of what he lost. She had trusted him with her soul. Every laugh, every secret, every tender moment, they were threads woven into the tapestry of their life together. He had a way of making the world shrink to just the two of them, making her believe that love could shield her from everything. But love, she learned, could be a weapon. The night it ended, she was blind with hope. He whispered promises she wanted to hear, painted futures she could almost touch. Then, with a flick of his hand, her world shattered. "Not enough," he said, and walked away. The pavement was cold against her skin, biting and unyielding. She tried to rise, but the weight of betrayal pinned her down. Every step she had taken toward him, every sacrifice she had made, dissolved into the dark night air. Laughter followed him like a curse, echoing off the empty buildings, leaving her hollow and trembling. The city around her offered no solace. Friends, neighbors, colleagues, they accepted his story without question. She became a ghost in her own life, erased by the man who had vowed to cherish her. Her apartment was emptied, her belongings gone, her name whispered like it had never mattered. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was public, humiliating, relentless. She sat on the cold floor, staring at the ceiling as the night bled into morning. Tears ran silently, leaving tracks of fire across her cheeks. Anger gnawed at her, a constant companion. Shame clung to her like a second skin. And yet, beneath it all, a spark remained, a seed of something stronger. The world had tried to break her, and in that cruelty, she began to learn. She learned who would abandon her, who would believe lies over truth, who could wield charm as a weapon. He had destroyed her, yes, but he had also unknowingly forged something far fiercer. She curled into the pain, letting it seep deep into her bones. One day, she told herself, she would rise. One day, she would return, and he would see what he had truly lost. The world did not end when he walked away. It only whispered a cruel lesson. Survival is not given, it is claimed. She learned to rise from the rubble of her own life. Slowly, painfully, deliberately. Every sleepless night, every hollow stare into the mirror, every quiet sob on her bedroom floor became part of her education. She taught herself patience. She trained her mind, sharpened her instincts, and built walls that no charm could breach. Her body, once fragile with grief, grew strong. She learned to move with purpose, to speak with precision, to listen with intent. She observed the world in ways she never had before. The way people revealed themselves in small gestures, in fleeting glances, in whispered doubts. Knowledge became her weapon. Silence became her shield. And inside, something remarkable stirred, a calm she had never known. Not numbness, not despair, but focus. Clarity. The pain of betrayal was no longer her prison. It was her teacher. She turned the fury into strategy, the heartbreak into determination. She rebuilt herself from the ground up, layer by layer. Her appearance, her presence, her aura, all crafted with intent. She moved through the world like a shadow, unnoticed yet impossible to ignore. People sensed the quiet power she carried, though they could not name it. She did not seek vengeance yet, for she knew timing was everything. Every detail of her transformation was preparation. Every choice a seed planted for the day she would step back into the world that had abandoned her. And she was patient. Every skill honed, every lesson learned, every scar embraced, they were hers, and she would wield them when the time came. She had once been fragile. Now, she was elemental, a storm waiting behind calm skies, a fire held beneath a mask of serenity. The girl he left for dead was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth, who commanded her space, who would bend the world to her own rhythm. And one quiet truth anchored her rebirth: she would return, not as the broken, trembling girl who once loved him blindly, but as the force he could never have imagined, the truth he would one day be forced to face. She returned to the city that had once mocked her pain, but she no longer belonged to fear. Every street she had run along, every alley where shadows had once swallowed her cries, now seemed smaller, tamer. She moved among them like a ghost with purpose, unseen but always present, every step measured, deliberate. Her smile was calm, polite, unassuming, a mask that hid the fire beneath. She listened more than she spoke, observed more than she moved. The people who had once dismissed her as weak now crossed paths with someone they could not easily read. And she liked it that way. She watched him from a distance. The man who had discarded her, the one whose arrogance had been so certain, still carried the same careless confidence. He had rebuilt his life atop lies and charm, assuming the world would always bend in his favor. He did not know she had changed, that she had risen from her own ashes, sharper, stronger, unstoppable. Her return was quiet. She did not announce herself. She did not rush. She let her presence seep into the corners of his life, subtle as a shadow. Invitations declined, small humiliations in professional circles, connections she cultivated while he remained blind to the shifting tides. Each subtle act was a brushstroke on the canvas of his unraveling, invisible yet precise. Every encounter with him was a test, a smile when he bragged, a nod when he boasted, a calm acknowledgement when he tried to provoke fear. She allowed him to think he remained in control while she quietly recalculated every move, every weakness, every opportunity. Patience became her ally, timing her weapon. The city, once a prison, was now her stage. Every whispered doubt, every subtle hesitation she planted in his mind, edged him closer to the realization he could not see the woman before him for what she truly was. She walked among them with grace, quiet power radiating from her. The girl who had been left to die was gone. In her place was a force measured, unshakable, and precise. And when the moment came, he would finally understand the weight of a soul he thought he had crushed. She would return fully. She would take what was rightfully hers. And he would kneel not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it. The day of reckoning came quietly, without fanfare, without the world noticing. She did not storm into his life with rage or theatrics. Instead, she let her careful preparations speak. Every move had been calculated, every connection nurtured, every piece of information gathered like a puzzle she alone could solve. He walked into her sphere, confident, arrogant, believing the past held no power over him. But he was wrong. He did not see the woman standing before him. She was poised, serene, untouchable. Her calm was a blade, her silence a noose. Contracts he had assumed were secure fell apart. Allies he believed loyal quietly shifted to her side. Every boast, every assumption he had leaned on crumbled beneath the weight of her precision. She did not shout, she did not strike. She simply unveiled the truth, and it shattered him. You orchestrated this?" His voice trembled, disbelief and fear tangled together. "Yes," she said softly, eyes steady, lips a line of quiet power. "I rebuilt myself. And you failed to see me." Regret rippled through him, the arrogance he had worn like armor stripped bare. Every lie, every betrayal he had wielded against her returned in perfect, elegant symmetry. She had not sought revenge for cruelty, it was justice in its purest form. He knelt at her metaphorical door, first in disbelief, then in desperation. Words stumbled from his lips: pleas, apologies, confessions, but they found no purchase. She did not need his remorse, nor did she allow it to soften her resolve. She had transformed herself with patience, with strategy, with care. She had taken what was his to dominate and returned it to her as a mirror of truth. He saw, finally, the magnitude of what he had destroyed, and it was a reflection he could not escape. She stepped past him, leaving him to confront his failure alone. No vengeance screamed in her actions, no cruelty marked her triumph. Only dignity, only the quiet satisfaction of a soul reborn, a life reclaimed, and the undeniable knowledge that she was unbreakable. And he understood, too late, that some betrayals do not fade. They grow, and sometimes they return in a form too powerful to ignore. The city felt different now, softer, quieter, as if it recognized her transformation. The streets she once feared no longer held shadows. Every corner, every alley, every whisper of the past belonged to her, claimed with patience, strength, and quiet triumph. She walked through her days unafraid. Her laughter returned, gentle at first, then bold, untamed. She no longer sought validation, nor did she crave the approval of those who had abandoned her. Every step, every glance, every choice radiated the calm confidence of someone who had faced the void and emerged whole. Love returned, not reckless, blinding love, but steady, true, and patient. A hand that matched hers, a gaze that met hers without question, without doubt. Someone who honored the woman she had become, who recognized the scars as proof of survival, not as marks of weakness. Her apartment became a sanctuary, a place of light and warmth. Mornings were hers to savor with coffee and sunlight. Evenings held books and music, quiet pleasures she had once denied herself. Nights were for dreams she dared finally to claim, for plans she could now make without fear. The scars remained, a tapestry of memories etched into her skin and soul. Yet they no longer ached. They were medals, proof of endurance, of triumph over cruelty, of a heart that refused to break despite everything. She forgave not him, never him, but the world that had tried to strip her of her essence. She had turned their neglect, their lies, their betrayal into a foundation for something greater. She had not only survived, she had thrived. And when he occasionally appeared at the edges of her world, she smiled. Not for him, not because of him, but because she remembered the girl he had tried to destroy, and she loved what that girl had become. She had walked through fire, through betrayal, through humiliation, and emerged whole. She had claimed her power, her peace, her joy. She had reclaimed her life, her love, her freedom. She was no longer defined by what was taken from her. She was defined by what she had built from the ashes. The city, once cruel, now simply bore witness to her quiet brilliance. She was unshakable, radiant, and finally free. They thought they could bury her, silence her, erase her existence. They did not know that fire sleeps, not dies. Pain became her teacher, betrayal her forge, and from the ashes rose a soul too fierce to break. She bloomed in quiet strength, in patience, in dignity, in freedom. The world had tried to claim her, to crush her, to bend her into obedience, but she was uncontainable. She had been left to die, and yet she lived, whole and radiant, a force the world could neither ignore nor forget, a woman who had become everything he could never take.